Yomi, thank you so much for joining us. I mean, no doubt that's potentially will scare a lot of people, given the history of Nigeria's dependence on oil. And while some may argue with whether or not this is truly the end for oil in terms of the next 5 decades, I wanted to get your perspective on the trajectory we're seeing in terms of that shift towards non-oil revenue sources.
Well, that's very true. So it will send a lot of jitters down the spine of many people, knowing the traditional reliance that the country had placed on oil revenue. It's about 90% of our foreign exchange earnings is from oil. We make most of our revenue to run this government from oil. So if that reality is setting in, is hitting hard the way it's doing, I think it will intensify the effort and the actions towards growing non-oil revenue sources, particularly taxes, which government seems to have woken up in the past few years, but we still need to do a whole lot of things to deepen that space and be able to get as much as we really should from that space.
I wanted to draw your attention to, if you like, the 4 cardinal pillars of rebuilding the FRS institutional, its efforts to really play its part in bringing the much-needed non-oil revenues. Now, the new executive chairman has pointed out that institutional framework reform, robust collaboration with stakeholders, building a customer or taxpayer-centric institution, which of course is the FRS, and making the FRS data-centric. I just want to get your thoughts as to whether or not you think potentially the FIRs may have left something critical off that list as we look at how technology is evolving, we look at how Nigeria remains a very informal sector. Do you think that there is something out there that the FIRS really needs to hone in on in terms of its approach?
No, absolutely. So I think those 4 points resonate quite well with me. And I would say that at least 2 of those have seen the FRS, do some things in that respect. So one is about building institution and just refocusing on capacitating the team. Within FRS, we have close to maybe 9,500 people. The amount of knowledge and the amount of capacity and the resources that is available to that crop of people will determine, the rate at which they will run in collecting revenue. So that's quite critical. You must build institution. You must empower the system and the structure to run. You must give them adequate training. You must, expose them to latest tool and technology to be able to do what they want to do. And in terms of collaboration, I think this is all, and maybe building an institution that is taxpayer-centric. I think it's also very critical. The whole of this week, I think the FRS leadership had been on the southwestern zone trying to do road shows around. I saw images of them visiting Lagos State Governor, visit Ogun State Governor, and all of that, and even some market women collaboration and all of that. I think we need all of that to be able to drive the extent of reception, and the knowledge and the awareness of the system across. And if you talk about data, and I think that's revolve around the use of technology.
Sure.
So that's germane. Even if FRS multiply the number of its head count by 2 to say 20,000 or thereabout, there's just so much they can do in this current age. Everything runs by the power of technology and by automation, and all of that. So what we were saying, because I was at a retreat where some of this conversation around focusing on data is, and it's not limited to FRS. Many agencies of government has pockets of data and information sitting in different places, and we're not extracting intelligence. We're not extracting value from those. How many people are paying taxes? Why? Who isn't paying tax? What is the profile? There are a lot of linkages that is going on. So now that FRS is saying all businesses with no tax ID must be registered and all of that. So what do you do at the back end? To be able to link people together, to be able to track revenue, and to be able to follow the money, literally speaking. So all of those are quite critical. But if I'm to add something on the layer of that, I think it will be, first of all, realizing the fact that the amount of revenue you're going to make from any economy is actually dependent on the level of economic profitability. So we need to do a lot more on making sure that we build the economy. Of
Sure.
course, many of that may not sit with FRS because FRS is the administrative organ, but they must know the connectivity between their role and what is going on in the economy. So we can be issuing discordant tunes. We can be on one hand trying to encourage investment to come in, encourage investors to thrive within the economy, and then we're doing some things on the other hand that essentially seems like we're sending them away. So
Right.
the economy needs to be thriving before we can collect that much.
Yes, clearly many can query whether or not their target of 8.5 trillion naira in tax revenue for 2020 is realistic, especially given the issues around the state of the economy and just essentially the resources and the way the FIRS works right now. But what I would like to hear from you is if you like, a paradigm shift in its approach. And there are two things that I think are very important. You've also already mentioned technology, so is the FIRS embracing technology as the culture of the way forward? And the second is trying to encourage people to come more voluntarily.
That's
so
correct.
I just wanted you to speak on that point.
Yes, that's correct. So there's a tall order staring at the FRS this year. So the target is 8.5 trillion or thereabout for 2020. Well, a little below the target for 2019. 2019 was 8.8 trillion, but we ended up collecting about 5.2 trillion, which was even below what we collected in 2018.
The more reason why I said that we can query whether or not this is realistic.
Absolutely. So if we're moving from 5.2 trillion collection in 2019 and targeting 8.5 trillion, that's huge. But if you look at it from the bedrock of the level of tax penetration, the number of those who are registered, the distribution of that 8.5 trillion between VAT, customs, income taxes, personal income taxes, and PPT, you realize that there's still a lot of gap to be covered. And that's why, for me, if we focus on maybe 1, 2, 3 things. So one, the issue of technology. So with the tax ID coming in and with all of this connectivity we are doing with...
You think that's a game changer?
I think it's a game changer. But it's in the level of implementation and the focus of driving this through that will determine how far we go.
Okay, Yomi, unfortunately, I would have loved to continue with this, but we have run out of time for this segment. But thank you so much for the insight.